So we are live now. Just give it a minute for people to join and then. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SaaS from Scratch session. I'm Vani Kola from Kalari Capital, and it's truly my pleasure to host Saahil Goel today. Saahil is the co-founder of Shiprocket, which has become one of India's largest e-commerce enabler in the logistics and expanding into other services and supporting e-commerce merchants. In the decade that Shiprocket has been from a young company to a successful large enterprise today, they've, of course, gone through many challenges as entrepreneurship and company building demands, and exploring that journey and those insights is Saahil with us today. And Saahil, thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation today. And I'm sure there are lots of founders that look up to you and are eager to hear and learn from you.
Thank you so much, Vani, and it's a real pleasure being here. And thank you also to kind of support the ecosystem of India, helping startups scale, giving your advice, bringing capital into the mix. And I know you've been at it for a long time as well. So real pleasure being here and chatting with you today.
Saahil, there is one question that keeps coming up generationally. It doesn't matter how many years we are in this business, which is, how does a very successful company's origin start, right? And I feel like if people understood more of the origin story, maybe we debunk some of the myths that gets glamorous when a company is successful, and more people are inspired to try. So, or not just try, but attempt and, fulfill their dreams. But so I'm always interested in the origin idea. So what gave you the confidence that you should start this company? Sometimes people arrive at it with a lot of trial and error. Other times, someone has a very deep domain understanding and they see a problem that they want to attempt. So just trying to see from where the idea emerged for you and where the courage emerged for you.
Yeah. I think the courage is something I would like to focus on more, or passion as I would like to reword it. Because I think if you have passion for something that you are very dedicated to or committed to, the courage comes, and nothing is easy, right? I mean, even to kind of do well in a job and kind of move up the ladder, that also requires a lot of effort and courage in many ways. So I think for us, like when Gautam and I, started, it was very honest, right? A lot of people talk about their origin stories as, a personal problem that they faced, and they thought that, if they're facing it, other people are probably also facing it. And that's a pretty typical story. In our case, actually, that was not the reality, right? For us, it was largely about not having to work 9 to 5. And that was the big push, or the big reason to say, look, dhanda karna hai. Like, we don't want to, we don't want to work for somebody, and we want to do our thing. And that I think that commitment, and then the fact that it was done at a time when it was not really a very well accepted way of doing things. Most people thought, I got kicked out of my job and this is why I was doing this, or I couldn't hold down my job, maybe, right? It became even more to prove in the beginning, to your friends and family, saying, oh, I've taken this step, I can't fail, right? Because it'll become like a black mark on what you did. And I think that sort of resilience of saying that you can't really quit, and you be humble, be flexible and keep going at it. At least for some of the qualities that I can, in retrospect, figure out. And I talked to many entrepreneurs on the qualitative front. It's always that, right? It's always there has to be an itch. It cannot be for the superficial stuff, saying that, okay, this is the kind of lifestyle I want to project, or I just feel that sometimes the idea of the startup becomes bigger than the actual startup, right? I think that should not kind of motivate people. And beyond that, the other thing you asked is sort of how did you get on the idea. That was more like, we had a few things we were discussing, and from trying to digitalize the wedding business in India to figuring out e-waste recycling. We tried discussed a bunch of things. And I used to build websites for a long time. It was something that I was pretty passionate about. I got a call from my uncle at the time saying that, hey, I want to, he was building a shoe brand and he wanted to go online. And he called me saying that, can you, because I was the family like IT guy or whatever. And
Yeah.
he said, can you help me build this? And living in the US, the exposure really helped because, I saw how Amazon was, how integrated it was in my life, even 15 years ago or 12 years ago. Shopify was starting to become somewhat prevalent. And my natural reaction was that, there's got to be a Shopify style offering for India. And when I looked around and I didn't find anything, that became a little bit of an insight saying, okay, why is there nothing in India? And India is such a large SMB, population. Gautam and I both came from SMB families ourselves. So there was a little bit of this understanding that, look, there's got to be tech for people to do stuff. And when I found that there indeed wasn't anything there, that became a big driver to say, look, this might be our ticket out of our jobs and let's work on this idea. So that's literally how we came together. And the last thing I'll mention is that we actually didn't start thinking we were starting up, right? We were starting a business. We were not a startup. Like, we didn't know what a startup was. Our goal was that we'll pool 10 lakhs each, and then we have to make it last enough that the company starts to generate money so that it can at least give us the salaries in 2 years that we make today, and then we'll see what to do, right? And then obviously, as we got into it, one thing led to another, and we realized, oh wait, we might be a startup. We just didn't know that this something like that. So the awareness
Yeah.
was very low at that time.
When you talked about your uncle, I had a trigger of a memory from a very long time ago. We all have one of these stories that direct us. So I think when I graduated from engineering, I was visiting an aunt and she had just had her mixie broken and she was like, can you fix it? You're the engineer. I'm like, no, I'm not that kind of an engineer. And then she's like, why did you do engineering if you can't even, do this? So we always have someone that's going to ask us to do something that
Yeah.
shows us up or whatever. So hopefully the uncle was happy with whatever services you could provide him.
He's still a
But
customer, so I assume that
he's
he was.
still a customer. That's good. That's very good, right? So, but yeah, the impetus and inspiration comes from different places. You talked about the Shopify model, and obviously you're in a very different business, not different, but ancillary. And, sometimes one inspiration leads to another.
Yeah.
And when a founder finds their sort of true north, meaning they really find their product market fit, unlike, again, one of those myths, there is this notion there's a eureka moment and then it just is that, but rarely is it like that, even in my entrepreneurial journey. And that might be at times the case. There is a problem you start with and that's the problem, but that takes you to the summit. But generally most of the time it's not. So the interesting thing is the intangible. Some entrepreneurs start with something and that gives them a deeper, more nuanced insight to find their north, so to speak. And we call those pivots. Call them whatever you will. But some entrepreneurs do a very good job of it, like you have done, right? And sometimes others are either stuck on the same problem for which there's no market for too long and aren't willing to see the reality, and or sometimes they give up too soon, right? So what are your thoughts for founders out there on how to pivot, when not to pivot, and perhaps even when to quit?
No, it's a great framing of this phenomena, right? Because you can talk about this topic multiple ways, but I love the way you frame it. because that's the truth ultimately. And by the way, it is not a very simple answer, because on one hand you need conviction to make things work, right? Your board will guide you saying, oh, you need to be fully in, you need to be vested, right? So you tell yourself a lot of that, you get married to the thing. On the other hand, you may be married to the wrong thing and you may not
Yeah.
get the right set of people around you to tell you. I don't think anybody means not well, but I just don't think sometimes it's too nuanced for anybody to be able to distill out and tell you. So it is very much of a step back conversation that the founder needs to have with themselves. It's also about being honest to yourself, saying, look, why am I doing what I'm doing, or why am I taking the company in X direction or Y direction? Oftentimes I've found that these things happen when or wrong directions are taken up. It's because there is some external FOMO, that certain markets growing faster, maybe I should be capturing that. And sometimes that is the right thing to do as well, by the way, because you can get inundated or you can get left behind. So unfortunately, it's not a straightforward answer, right? But I'll tell you a few things where I do think that you can make a more, or let's say a better decision, right? I do think that when we did what we did, we always looked at sort of one, committing to the cause or the mission, right? So we are a very mission driven company. Our mission over the last 12 years has not changed, right? We very firmly believe that small businesses need inclusion, they need the right amount of technology to be able to participate in commerce openly, freely. That mission statement still holds, nothing has changed there. And instead of trying to completely pivot into different businesses, different markets, different things, I think we kept trying to change our product stack to say, look, the market is there, like we know the market's going to ultimately have its day. We simply need to find the right way to reach to them, right? And I think that takes some amount of patience and consistency to just keep hammering that down with different products. Oftentimes people try to build a product and then find the customer for it. I just think that's the wrong way to build any business. In fact, we spent the first entire year uh, barely talking to customers, sitting in a room, building our do-it-yourself website builder. And when we took it out, we realized that there was probably only the early adopters that would take it, which is what happened. And very quickly we realized that, oh, we'll have to add shipping, we'll have to add payments, this won't work, that won't work. Soon it was becoming into more of a services style business, which we didn't sort of anticipate. So I think it's a very iterative process. Number one, I don't think you can get the perfect answer. Number two, and I think being open to almost expecting pivots, right, sets you up for success rather than it being a sky is falling moment, saying, oh, this didn't work, now what do I do, and feeling despair around it. If you can embrace it, saying, look, it is going to be like this, and you need to be nimble and flexible and humble, right, and be willing to kill a feature or kill a product and then move on. For us, all of that, and again, I can say all of this only in retrospect. Believe me, when I was going through it, I felt like everybody else, like a football, right? Like you're just kind of going around the room a little bit without knowing what's happening. But I think what kept us going was the fact that we both, and later on my other co-founders, all committed to the mission to say, look, this is going to happen one or the other way, and we want to make our mark in enabling SMEs, because if you take a 20-year view of India, this is going to be a massive problem, right? Maybe it's not right now, maybe this is not the right product, but the need market fit is there. We need to find the product market fit, and eventually it'll happen, right? We have to just keep trying. And there were lots of learnings, as you said. There was not one silver bullet or one eureka moment. It was a series. It was almost 7 years of study, or the first 5-6 years of study before we landed on the fact that, oh, I think that e-commerce needs cash on delivery and shipping enablement when people are trying to sell outside of Amazon and Flipkart, on an Instagram channel or a Shopify channel, and we don't have that. Like, that's not there in India. At the face of it, it seems like a very thin idea. It seems like a very, typically investors will ask you, what's the moat, what's your right to win, what's the market size, and we've got red crosses on all three when we started the business. But the conviction was so strong that, look, I've done the other bit, and I know this is a big problem. I don't know how big it will become, but for whoever's going to use it, they will not be able to do without it. So rather than being a little bit to a bunch of people, in different segments, we decided to be very important to a smaller segment, And that gave us a lot of insight. It narrowed our focus in some ways, but allowed us to build depth in one area versus constantly trying to, go here and there. So I think it is a mixture of being open and being kind of almost expecting one to pivot in a micro way, sometimes a full macro way like us. Um, and definitely having a commitment and a conviction to a cause, not to a product, because I think products are nothing but a manifestation of what you think is the answer, right? They may not always be what your customers think are the answer, but the problem may be very real. So sometimes people throw the baby out with the bathwater, saying, no, this failed, this is not a problem. That's not true, right? Somebody else comes along with a different solution to the same problem and makes it work. So I think you need to be able to kind of distill that in your head, and the ultimate way to do that is numbers, right? So if you look at your product market fit style metrics or conversion funnels or retention or NPS, or what are customers telling you, are you having to push them to use your product versus them telling you, why aren't these three features there? I need it immediately. Those are signs that we've done both. We've been on a poor product market fit for the first half of our company's career, and then a good product market fit in the second half. So I know exactly like what it used to be and then what it became, right? So I do think there are objective ways of measuring that now. There's a bunch of tools out there, bunch of entrepreneurs out there, lots of benchmarking can be done. So I do think one should be objective and then focus on the cause of why you started the company.
No, I'm taking a very nuanced insight here to say make the product a means to achieve your mission and not making the product itself be the holy grail. And I think that's very good advice. And on this context, there's a question from Nikhil, which I'll try to summarize for you. And I think you've kind of given the answer, but maybe there's something you would like to add to this question. His question is, what advice would you give SaaS founders about maintaining focus on their core product while pursuing new growth opportunities?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and it's not an easy one. One of my investors, Arjun Sethi, who's from Tribe Capital, some 3-4 years ago, I started struggling a lot where we're trying to balance our core focus on shipping, which is still very much the mainstay of the business. But at the same time, we saw all these other opportunities in using our distribution, to build a checkout engine, for example, or build a warehousing network, or build a conversion stack, and so on. And the challenge is that, on one hand, if you have a growing enterprise, right, the rhythm of running that is completely different from doing like hacky 0 to 1 innovation. So one of the things that that really helped me was Arjun recommended this book called Loon Shots, right? Which I recommend everyone to read. And even if you read halfway through it, you'll get the concept, which was very, very impactful for me. And it has actually changed entirely how we think about, our business, where we have a very intentful focus on running -1 to 0 projects, 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, and 100 to 1,000. And it's a very well used vocabulary within the company, so people don't get confused. If you make a process in finance for payments approval, for example, for something that is scaling or has scaled, and you apply the same process to, let's say, a trial that 2 engineers are trying to do on the weekend, you're just creating red tape, you're just creating bureaucracy and slowing things down, right? But on the other hand, if you remove the processes on the sort of big part of your business or the scaled part of your business, then your wheels will come off, right? So I think it is a little bit of double hatting, and you have to be mindful of that. And then it's also about people mapping, right? I always the mistake we make is we end up putting our best people on the thing that has become big, right? I think the opposite needs to be done. You need to put your best people on the stuff that you have to build, right? Not the stuff that is already built, because what's already built, the return on investment on the best people is actually diminishing, because the needle they can move in something which is just infant is much higher versus something which has already kind of got a lot of legs and got a lot of rhythm to it. Of course, you need good people to run that. I'm not saying that, but all I'm saying is that the mistake we sometimes make is saying, okay, I have this great idea. Let me put like a junior person on it, or let me try this, right? And oftentimes something which, even with the very high potential, doesn't go anywhere because you didn't put the right kind of person on it. So I think it's about balancing the two. It's about making sure the culture of your company allows it. And if you're very small, then I don't recommend doing 6 things. Sure. I've done it. Believe me. There are people who can do it well, I'm sure. Let me not give generalized advice, but I found that it was the easiest way to fail, because you did average on everything, and that's just not how it
Mm.
works.
Guys, that some of you wanted to know what's the book Sahil was recommending. It's Loon Shots. And Sana, maybe you can put down a link for Loon Shots into the chat. But coming back to what we are talking about, what you were just talking about, Sahil, then I want to understand your philosophy to inorganic growth, because there comes a time where build it in house is fine, but when you are in a very competitive market, sometimes you have to consolidate markets or expand into new markets. And there is, again, like most things in life, there's no one silver bullet answer. So what is your philosophy? How do you think about, you can't stand still, you have to keep growing. So beyond a certain point, to get that continuous growth, how do you think about it, just from a framework?
See, I think growth is a given, right? It's the single most important thing that uh, any startup should focus on. Of course, you have to deliver profits and deliver shareholder value, but I'm saying ultimately anything that's doing well needs to continue doing well, right? And as you rightly said, sometimes in a certain market, there are two, three ways to think about it. Sometimes there is an opportunistic thinking, just saying that, okay,
Yeah.
it's like value engineering or financial engineering or just arbitrage, and there are opportunities like that. So one can be smart about it, and think about how 2 and 2 is 12. If typically we look out for two or three things at a philosophical level, it's very simple. Our business actually has distribution, right? We work with over 100,000 paying
Mm,
customers every year. We make about 5% of their GMV that flows through us. And we know that there's an opportunity to take the 5% to 20%. But each of these things is a stack by itself, right? Now,
mm,
we can either build the stack organically because we're a heavy engineering tech company, but then you take time, or you can use inorganic methods to accelerate that, right? So that's basically the philosophy. So it's mostly capability that we typically look out for. We have been quite acquisitive in the past. We've actually acquired 5 companies till date, and it's been wonderful experience
mm,
just to bring those teams on, bring those technology stacks on, and we've seen the benefits. Like we've been able to scale our use our distribution, sorry, with those technology stacks, get those people or founders under the fold to kind of work with us. So that's been a big highlight. Um, Sometimes it's that, right? Sometimes it's just about consolidation, right? Like you said,
mm,
which again is more of a macro market dynamic. So, for example, we had a very fierce number two competitor, Picker, which we knew that ultimately, like, we're gonna get into a fight, and we were. Uh, so we
mm,
thought that, rather than kind of putting our energies against each other, what happens if we pool them and kind of one together, and that's worked out beautifully, right? So I think it's
mm,
sometimes about, like you said, market consolidation. Sometimes it's just capability, and
mm,
oftentimes it's just value engineering, and it's you got to be open minded about that stuff. I'll tell you what is not, or what I underestimated even after a lot of people
mm,
telling me, is that it's extremely hard. The
mm,
cultural context is extremely hard. The systems that need to merge, right? As a product and technology guy, you always underestimate that because you know how to build them. But what I did not realize is that uh, building something from scratch, or building into something when it's not live, it's a completely
mm,
different ball game than when the engine is running. You can't swap out an engine of a car while it's running,
mm,
no matter what speed it's running at. It could be running at 5 kilometers an hour. You just paid money for something. You're not going to shut it down, right? Because your bot's going to ask you what happened and so on. So that, I think, completely underestimated the effort it
mm,
was going to take to merge the systems. And if you don't merge your systems, it's not going to work for you. It's going to be a complete waste,
mm,
right? It'll just be
mm,
sitting on the side. Like you won't really reap the
mm,
benefits. So
mm,
again, just word of caution, like basically expect a lot of work on the cultural aspect as well as on the
mm,
system integration. I think I can't overstate the importance of
mm,
uh, imagining what it will mean to rewrite into your stack,
mm,
no matter how small the acquisition. So, but those two things, being cognizant, if you have the currency, if there is a great opportunity, if there's a meeting of the minds, the value systems have to kind of match. All of those things are a go, and you have the means to do it. Then by all means, I don't think there's anything wrong with being acquisitive.
Mm. You know, while we are on this topic, I think it's apt to discuss your philosophy on all things funding, because anything requires money, even the 10 lakhs plus 10 lakhs you and your partner or co-founder put into the company, let alone everything that came after. And certainly acquisition takes funding of some sort, could be your equity, could be whatever it is, the capital raising capability you have on the platform or whatever it is. So what's your philosophy around funding, valuation, and especially founder dilution? Because some of these things is going to dilute you as a founder, and sometimes that becomes a big bottleneck in founders' mindset. Generally, I found that to be a bigger wall in Indian founders, not having a framework on when to dilute, how much to dilute, and why to dilute. And this is less of a problem in the Silicon Valley or other startup ecosystems.
So I have a couple of reflections there, right? Because we've done several rounds, worked with several kinds of investors. See, first of all, I always tell people that your share becomes bigger by growing the pizza pie overall, right? Not by having a bigger slice of the pizza. That's just not aspirational. And often I'll tell people that, look, 100% of zero is still zero, right? So the point is, you need to figure out how the overall growth, because if you've been given a opportunity to be able to use capital and invest ahead of time, get more shareholders to believe in your vision and believe in your build, you need to take that seriously, and you need to be able to, thank God for that opportunity, rather than thinking, but it's going to dilute. Of course, it's going to dilute you, but that's how it works. And ultimately, if you're able to make a great outcome, right, it won't matter. Believe me, nothing is more satisfying than being able to make some impact than about, well, how much do I own and why, right? So for us, honestly, we never thought about it too much. For us, it was about, really, again, goes back to the mission, like what are we here to do? I don't think you should think about, like, if you're getting up every day and thinking about your economics, you should not be in a startup, because that's just not the way, that's not the right motivation to do it, right? You have to be motivated about something else. You have to be passionate about the mission, and then a lot of these things just end up becoming details. So I do think you should watch out. Now, again, if you get a bad set of investors that sort of take an undue advantage, etc., you should watch out for that. Don't take shitty terms, right? For sure, right? I'm not saying that just be blind to it, but at the same time, sometimes I meet founders who are too hung up on, I'm getting a 10% better valuation. I tell people it makes no difference, right? In the end, who are you going to work with is far more important, because with the right investor, the advice they'll give you, the freedom they might give you to operate, the connects they might make for you, how committed are they to your business, how much time do they have for you? Those are the things, right? What is the conviction coming in, right? Did they write you an independent, did they give you an independent commitment, or is it all pile on, right? Were they saying no first and then they said yes after somebody else said yes? Like, I look for those things, because ultimately you're getting into a partnership with somebody, right? It's not so much about, oh, I'm going to get money from somebody. Look out for that. And again, goes back to, like, what do you want to do? If you want to build a business and want to build it well, then focus on that, and over time it will accrue value, right? And if you do really well, your investors and board members will want you to have more and more incentives and more skin in the game. So it comes back. I mean, ultimately, it all goes back to, are you making an impact? Are you delivering value? So optimize that as the main goal, and then do whatever it takes to get there. I don't think focusing on dilution by itself is the right way to make decisions on, fundraising and so on. Because you can run a small profitable lifestyle business and not have any dilution, and nothing wrong with it. All I'm saying is, if that's what you want to do, that's great, right? It gives you peace of mind. There's no one to talk to. There's no one to sort of take along. It's just you, and that's completely fine as long as that's what you want. But if your goal is to make it big, you need capital. You cannot do it without capital, right? It's the single most important thing that goes hand in hand with any venture scale business, whether it's US, India, China, anywhere in the world. So, I mean, it's really your choice as a founder what you want to do.
Mm. No, I agree. I think we could just do an entire hour of podcast on this alone, and it would probably be a very good thing because this question keeps coming up all the time. But there is a question from Priyanka about what did you mean by system merging? But I'll throw that question in from a different context also. You talked about when you bring different companies or groups together, or when the car is going at a 5 kilometer even, how do you swap out the engine? When you're going through explosive growth market, building for scalability is many dimensions, people, all of that, channels, all of that. But there is another aspect, which, because you talked about being an engineering centric company, so you know this better than anybody, the scalability for tech on what's under the hood, the underlying architecture as we go. And the challenge is you can't build for it on day one, right? So if you do, you're just going to build something too big before it is needed, and you neither have the time nor the resources to do that. So how, and I've also seen companies not change what's under the hood quickly enough. You might have found the product market fit, but you're scaling, and then your systems, so to speak, or your architecture or your technology doesn't scale and can become quite catastrophic because if you realize that too soon. So again, how did you approach it? What's a framework you would offer? I say this also because one challenge I see, Sahil, is many times, I don't mean in the beginning, but even as the company grows, I look at their balance sheet or annual operating plan, and many times they are not allocating enough actually for technology. They say we already have a product, which is not always the case. So how do you think about it?
I think it's a tough question, Vani, and I made a lot of mistakes, by the way. So let me not try and be the expert here. See, I think I was quite passionate about sort of the tech side of things, but clearly not qualified enough in the beginning, which actually helped us because it helped us. It made me much more of a, I had a lot of FOMO on saying, you know what, okay, am I using the right stuff or am I building it wrong? Because early days, we couldn't afford a CTO, we couldn't afford a DevOps head. Like it was just stuff I was reading on the internet and asking other founders. I remember going to Piyush Bansal's office once saying, my websites are crashing every now and then. And I can't triple my server. Like I would start making losses. So what do? He said, have you ever heard of caching? So what's that? So and then the entire weekend I just went in. So I think it's about knowing the business and the problems and investing enough that at least okay, one way to think about it is don't invest for 3 years, but invest for 6 months. Get somebody who's passionate about scaling technology, or a early systems architect, or somebody who's like passionate about kind of scaling systems. And building too much too early will create a lot of maintenance headaches. So if you went fully microservices on day one, that's the stupidest thing you can do, because now you have all this code to maintain, all these instances to kind of service. Your costs will go through the roof, your development cycles will slow down. So start with maybe 2 or 3 monoliths that talk to each other, which are main logical breaks. Even the tech language you use or the stack you use makes a lot of difference, right? So we've migrated over the years to kind of take care of tech debt. But if you're starting up, don't try to pick the flavor of the month that, oh, everyone's using X, or everyone, there's a lot of like information now. And luckily at my time there wasn't enough information, so it was easy, right? But now there's all this like, if you're not on such and such stack, then you're not really, which is not correct, because honestly, like, different things need to be utilized differently for different workloads, not a one size fits all answer. So look inwardly, look at your customer metrics. Customer experience in any business is key, which means there should be no downtime, your response time should be fast, and you have to put a business lens to it as well, right? Which means that what's the cost of doing this? Because oftentimes you'll get CTOs telling you that, look, I can do this, but I need like double the money, and that's never the answer, because the business can't afford it. So that again is not the smartest thing to do. So I think it's a balance of saying, look, I'll do enough where it lasts me 6 months, then I'll relook at this whether my architecture is scalable again. We've refactored our entire code, I don't know how many times by now, right? Because it just like we cannot build it today, and that's not the advice or the expectation I have from the team. You do it bit by bit. Yes, it's rework. You take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but that's fine, because that's the need of the hour. Because if you did everything today, maybe you wouldn't be around to kind of see the future if you burn through your cash that quickly. So it's a balance between business, balance between understanding the top 3 4 expectations from the business, from the customer experience perspective. What does that mean from a tech perspective? Overbuilding is almost always a bad idea. Iterating, getting it 80% right is good enough. The other piece I do want to emphasize that I think a lot of people don't do is security, and more importantly, data security. I think it's imperative. I talk to a lot of founders. Nobody invests there. They think it's like, why do it? And maybe in the past it probably wasn't a big deal, but in the coming years, I think consumers are becoming much more aware of this, right? Especially in India, there's laws coming now around it, so it is something that one should factor in on day one as they build their systems, because it becomes much easier to build on top of it. Because if you set the framework right, saying, okay, my data needs to be hashed at rest, my APIs need to use this. Like if you set the kind of framework right on day one, it's much easier than going back and then sort of opening up all the stitches of the system, then putting patches and putting it back. It's just much harder.
So Sahil, I'm gonna completely switch gear and ask you some personal questions because I usually think, there is this image of a founder that somewhere we channel them through a tunnel vision, but they're very human. All of us are, and we have many facets to us. And in fact, in my personal opinion, most successful people, founders or otherwise, have many dimensions to their personality. I always encourage people in our team to figure out what is life all about for you. And while this may be a big part of it, there are other parts of you. If there aren't other parts of you, it actually might get quite dark sometimes. So I just want us to get to know you a little bit. So if you could mountain solo or build sandcastles, what's your idea? What would you do? What's your
Sorry, what was the first one? You said build sand.
Would you climb a mountain solo or sit and build sandcastles on a beach? What's your personality?
I would definitely climb a mountain, but I wouldn't do it solo.
Find somebody to go with.
100%. But any day. I mean, I love the beach, but
any day.
It's much more of a liberating experience much more of a fulfilling experience to go and, and I've trekked often with my wife, and I find it sort of, it's an easy choice, but I don't think I could do it alone. I would never travel alone.
No, mountains, love for mountains, we both share that. So I'm glad to find that. So what is happiness besides Bruno? And maybe you can explain Bruno also.
Yeah, so Bruno is our chief happiness officer. He was actually my dog, my pet. And then for whatever reason, he started spending some time in the office, to the point where he started loving it here and the office started loving him. So he found a new home and he got super pampered and has now become sort of the office pet. He's obviously a bag full of happiness. But other than that, I've got 2 children. They're sort of kind of bring big smiles to my face. I thrive on, like startup founders go through roller coaster in the same day. You'll every email, news, anything that goes on, you feel elated, and then the next thing drags you down, then the next thing elates you. I keep looking for those the high points of the day, of the hour, try and focus my attention on that and feel good about what's going on rather than obsess over what's going wrong. It may sound like a trivial thing to say, but my co-founders and I often talk about it. Like a lot of times you end up obsessing over everything going wrong, right? And while you should be self-reflective and self-aware, I think it's not healthy to only focus on. In fact, I would encourage you to look at the downs very objectively and the highs very passionately, and not the other way around. Because sometimes you say, oh yeah, we did that, but really I screwed up here. I'm like, okay, but why aren't you saying the other way around?
Mm,
And because it's a tough journey, it's not easy.
mm.
So definitely focus on that. That makes me happy. When you hit a target or something that you had been planning for a while goes well. I look out for those things, actively seek them out, and try to feel happy about it.
It's a great philosophy. You did mention loan shots, and I know you're a avid reader. Is there one or two other books you would recommend to the audience here and to founders in particular that made an impact for you in how you think about life or think about your purpose?
For sure, I think one book that both Gautam and I read before starting the company, like while I was in the US, he was here, and we just like somebody recommended it to me. I forget who actually. It's called Hard Thing About Hard Things, and it's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
entire story of basically Salesforce and how they kind of
yeah,
it's the way it's written actually is very applicable.
yeah,
Sometimes like you read books and it's
yes,
like, okay, it's a great philosophy, but
yeah,
that's like a book you can pick up every 3 4 years, and you can immediately relate to it, right? So I
yeah,
think the writing style of the book is very useful because it'll give you like a lot of anecdotes and a lot of everyday kind of stuff that you can pick up. So I think that made a huge impact. It also got him and I on the same page, which I think was very
mm,
important, because then we were both kind of saying, oh, you know
mm,
what? Remember how they did that in that book? I think we should, rather than saying,
yeah,
okay, let me give you the whole context. So I think that was very useful.
yeah.
The other book which I think read in my B school, which again made a huge impact, was Kristen uh, on it's called The Innovator's Dilemma, where it talks about sort
Uh,
of
yeah,
again similar concept like the loon shots. Why Kodak kind of couldn't stay
yeah,
up, why the US steel uh, old style steel mills couldn't survive, and why
mm,
innovation hits you in the face without you realizing it. It's a tough one because and when I read it at that time, it didn't make a lot of sense. Why? And I was like, oh, these companies are
mm,
stupid. But going through the years and observing other companies, observing myself, my own company, I realized that it's a very, very difficult problem, right? Because it's about where do you put
mm,
your time and resources. Innovations can be 10,000 innovations are possible, and you want to hang on to what you've got because when you have nothing to lose, it's very easy to pivot and easy to do things. But when you have something to lose, you start to think about should I put my time here? Should I put my resources here? So getting a framework to get sharper and sharper about evaluating opportunities, or thinking more and more like a resource allocator, right? A lot of people say be a capital allocator. I like to use the word resource allocator because ultimately time is probably a more valuable resource than capital as you scale. And having a framework, a dispassionate framework for it. I think Dipinder at Zomato does a great job of this. Like he's super kind of objective and surgical about pulling things out, launching things. It's very, very clear, and that's what keeps you ahead in the game, because you don't get stuck
mm,
in your own kind of web, and you're able to continuously be innovative no matter how big you become. I think Amazon does a great job at this as well as a company,
mm,
or Facebook does a great job as well. So I do think that building frameworks over time has helped. And it's more podcasts. There's something called Founders Podcast. I think I love listening to the stories of the most successful people in the world, or the most successful companies in the world. And the more you can learn from other people's experiences, the better it is, because is the wealth of knowledge is out there, either in books or in information. I think we should, as founders, try and learn what we can, and save us the trouble of reinventing everything ourselves.
So one last question, Sahil. If you could jam with anyone, past or present, who would that be? When you have that spare time, the elusive spare time.
I still jam with my co-founders, right? And it's the most fun thing in the world, right? My our wives hate it because they're like, "Don't you guys get enough time in the office?" And we're like, "Well, we do, but there is all transactional stuff. Like this is the step back
Yeah,
conversation. It's the best thing
yeah.
because there's a reason why co-founders stay together for so many years when they do, and when they do, it's this, right? This is the most fun part of why we started the company to begin with. It's like that you build on like each other, and then the next day you wake up and you say, you know what, that was a bunch of bullshit last night, which is fine, which is completely okay. But you need to kind of keep that alive. So for me, it would be like my co-founder. I love kind of building up with them. In fact, a bunch of people that we've hired from the industry over the period of time, many of them have either been like that from before or become like that. I'm not sure which one it is, but oftentimes I find that they're doing it or we're doing it with them too. So I think I'm very inward looking. Unfortunately, I don't have a nice answer to say I would do it with Jeff Bezos or with Dipinder. Even though I love both of those guys, I think it's for me the funnest thing would be to do it with my team here.
So maybe there's an interview tip for anyone looking to work at Shiprocket that you gave away. So that's great. Right. So, Sahil, I really loved our conversation. I think there are so many gems there for founders to, look out and mistakes to avoid. And, congratulations on your growth and success, and wish much, much more of that over the next decade to come. But I appreciate you taking the time today.
Pleasure, complete pleasure talking to you, Vani. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope the listeners got something out of it, and look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much for your kind words.
All right, take care. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone, for joining me and Sahil today. All right, I think we are done. Thank you.
Thank you, Vani.